All right, guys, this week we are going to be looking at consumption of news and information as well as media literacy. And I like to do this kind of at the start of the semester because it helps you kind of get in the mindset of what you're looking at and how it impacts you as you go forward, not only in this class, but as a professional out in the real world. Because when you consume media, you want to be able to know where it comes from, if that's reputable source, and then what to do with that information once you have learned about it. So, to begin with, we've all heard about fake news. More than likely, you probably associate fake news with Donald Trump, our former president. And um, the funny thing is that he didn't actually like invent the idea of fake news. He probably made it very popular when he was president, and even now as he's running for reelection. But fake news has been around for a very long time. So much so that back in ancient Greece, Plato, the ancient philosopher, often thought that if you wrote your thoughts down, and then somebody else read it without you being able to explain or answer questions, then that was considered fake news in a sense, quote unquote, because they could interpret it in a way that maybe you didn't intend. And so he thought that explaining things face to face was always the best. Of course, the church has always been involved in that idea of false information to some extent. They did not want people who were of poverty level or maybe lower income throughout history to have access to information, because then they would challenge the church, right? Because they could read the Bible on their own or do their own research or learn about their own epistemology and theology. And so the church has had its run-ins with fake news. Of course, that also goes into the books being printed for just the rich and privileged. If you weren't one of the people that was blessed with a family income growing up, a lot of times back in like the 1800s, early 1900s, you wouldn't have the ability to learn and then read and be able to process information on your own. Of course, when we started printing and manufacturing literature at a more rapid rate, at a cheaper rate where anybody could read and learn, we started getting things called broadsheets. And broadsheets were just ways that we could post information in the middle of like a town square. And that's great, right? People could learn about news, learn about what was going on, learn about new things in literature, etc., except for the fact that you had to rely on people that could read. And sometimes that could be detrimental, right? Because they could tell you anything and you would have to just assume that was it. Of course, we've also had fake news um, with war. Was certain wars throughout history, there was information that was recorded by the winners, and maybe that wasn't always reported correctly. We also have what's known as yellow journalism, and this was between two journalism newspaper editors, Hertz and Pulitzer, and they wanted to get more readers for their newspaper. And so they would start exaggerating the news. It wasn't so much made up, some of it was, but most of it was just exaggerated to the point where it was sensationalized. Of course, then you go to radio. Um, you had news radio, and then you had radio that was dramatized, and sometimes people couldn't tell the difference. Then you get into tabloids, which we still have now. You never know what celebrity is going to have a six-headed alien baby. And then now we are into television news, specifically news in this day and age. Has turned more from giving unbiased information to having a conversation with people. And so people are spouting their opinion and what they think about things versus just saying the facts. And then, of course, we have social media where the majority of people are getting their information about what is going on in the world now, and some of it is legitimate, some of it not so much. And then we have deep fake videos, and this is getting to be a problem even more now with AI. Not just so much videos, but any kind of picture, any kind of information can be thought of or made or created using AI. So, as you can see, fake news has kind of been around for a long time. Now, as we move forward, what I want you to start thinking about is how are you getting your news, your media, any kind of information? It doesn't have to just be news, but how are you getting it? Where are you getting it from? And how are you processing it? And that's what we're going to learn a little bit about today. So, social media itself or digital media has really tried to put a stop to um, news that is false. But in that, you've also had this in between where they may say, oh, this is false information or this needs to be disputed. And actually, it was okay. It was just something that they caught with a hashtag or a word in it, or somebody else reported it because they didn't like it. And so, even though they're trying to put a stop to false information, they can't do it in a way that's going to really make a difference, especially when people start learning how to get around the filters and things like that. So, what do we do? How do we really think about the things that we are looking at, reading, watching, and how can we do better to make sure that this information is something that we, one, need to be consuming, and two, is worthy of our time and is truthful? So, one, you need to be aware that maybe when you're looking at things on social media, on the internet, you could be put into what is called a fragmentized or siloed media algorithm. And basically, that is just the algorithm or the AI that helps pick and choose what you see on the internet and on social media is really trying to hone in where you only see certain things or certain people and you're only hearing certain types of information. And that's great, if your For You page is all about cats and you really like cats. But if you're not getting, a well rounded idea about what's going outside of the world of cats, then you might be missing out on something. You also want to be a very active participant in the news process, looking at different news organizations. How are they? Talking about things, what are their sources, how are they compared to other reliable sources, and how is that compared to maybe news sources outside of the US or the British newspapers. You also want to see that you have lots of access to information. I mean, the World Wide Web is at our fingertips with our phones, but sometimes that can be overwhelming. And so you want to make sure that, yes, you have information that you can look at anytime, any place, anywhere, but is that information reliable? Then you want to look at the aggregation of it. So, one of the big things about social media is that sometimes we see things that are old. It can be a few days old, it could be a few hours, and sometimes it can be a few years, depending on if people are posting it. And so, you want to make sure that you are up to date on not only who's posting and what they're posting, but the things that they're posting are up to date. With the advancement of social media, we have often seen that there's not just like this one institute of news anymore, right? You don't have to get your news from a newspaper, a magazine, television news, the radio. And so we've seen this diminished idea of institutional power because you can get your news on TikTok. I love watching Under the Desk News. I think she's hilarious and she does a really good job of reporting all the sides, but she's not like this institution that we have to watch like Fox News or CNN. She's just this journalist who takes this platform and she reports on things. However, with those kinds of things, you have to be sure that people aren't being biased, that they have this objectivity, right? This is hard to do in general as a journalist because we all have our opinions about things, but you want to make sure that the information that you are consuming is from both sides. That you're seeing both sides of the coin and you are trying to make an informed decision about that without just hearing one side. We have also seen that new forms of news, aka like maybe TikTok or Instagram, things like that, blogs, they are great. You can get information from them, but compared to powerful and well respected news outlets, how do they compare? What is the reports? What are they doing differently? And sometimes the big news organizations are better, and sometimes the more independent ones are better. And last but not least, as you navigate this digital ecosystem, you want to be aware of trolling, clickbait, and of course, anything created by AI, because this is just going to add on to the things that make it harder to suss out what is real and what isn't. I also want to just touch on the fact that fake news and propaganda are two different things. And I think that you need to be aware of that, especially as you navigate the digital world. So, fake news is false stories that appear to be news. They are spread on the internet or other media, and really they are influencing some kind of political view, or sometimes they're made as a joke, right? Like the Daily Show. However, propaganda is information or ideas that are spread by a certain organization or your government or some kind of higher up that is trying to influence people's opinion. um, they don't necessarily lie, but they don't give all the facts, or they only emphasize certain things. And so while there are some correlations between fake news and propaganda, one is completely false, while the other one is really trying to sell you certain ideas of the truth to make you sway to a certain um, side. And so just be aware of the difference, and then how they are the same. But I think this can help you to really navigate what's going on in the digital realm. When it comes to how people trust news on the internet, 34% of Americans trust news on social media. Again, there's nothing wrong with that as long as the sources are reputable. 18% of Americans consider the media an enemy of the people. And we saw this rise a lot during President Trump's 4 years. And then from there, it has gotten a little bit better, but not much. 50%, 52% of Americans think online news websites report fake news. 31% of people share fake news on social media without checking, meaning that they just share the information. They don't go and make sure that the dates are right, the statistics are right, or compare it to other news from reliable sources. And then 49% of people later found out that what they shared was fake. And most of the time, they don't go back and try to explain that it was fake, take it down, or make a difference. Okay, so we've talked a lot about fake news and fake media and how to kind of get around it and find out what is truthful and what's not. But I also want to look at just how we are consuming news as a society. So, you can see from 2020 to 2023, we have risen in how we consume our news. And so, a lot of the time, we are getting it from social media. And then just news consumption by social media site, Facebook and YouTube lead the way. So most people, if they're looking for news on those on social media, they're going to Facebook or YouTube. Then we have Instagram, TikTok, X, or formerly known as Twitter, is down in the middle, and I think that is just getting lower and lower, especially as we see it kind of in its downfall. And then, of course, Twitch is at the bottom, and Twitch is mostly for entertainment. I'll let you look at this. This is just demographic profiles and how they identify politically, and then what platform they are using. Women, of course, are using Facebook more. Men are using YouTube more. Women use more Instagram and use Twitter more. Funny enough, more women use TikTok and more men use Reddit. And then you can see kind of how that differs between ages and different other demographics. When we are trying to find reputable media outlets, I think one thing you need to think about is that some media outlets are known for biases. And this is a media bias chart, meaning it kind of shows you if they are more conservative, more liberal, or if they're in the middle. And you can see that, like CNN, for instance, it leans a little bit to the left. ABC leans a little bit to the left. Even NPR is a little bit to the left. AP is in the center. BBC is in the center. I like both of those. The Wall Street Journal really tries to be in the middle of Rutgers. Um, Now there is an NPR news only versus NPR opinion. NPR, the news is in the center. The opinion is a little more liberal. Then you go to the right, so you'll see like CNN is on there. I mean, not CNN, Fox News. Sorry. Whew. Then you have like The Blaze or the Daily Wire, things like that. They all lean more to the right. And so when you're reading these things, this is important to kind of understand, because then you can know, oh, well, they're saying this because this is kind of where they lean and things like that. On the chart on the left, it also has reliable, mixed reliability, somewhat reliable, and unreliable as another highlight to kind of help you navigate that as well. Another way that you can look at this is almost like the good, evil, neutral good, neutral evil kind of thing if you play like Dungeons and Dragons. But basically, the ethical intent and the accuracy in traditional journalism, you're going to be like for the Associated Press. If the ethical intent is high, but maybe the information is false, it might be things like the Colbert Show or the Daily Show, where they're taking the information and they want to get it to you, but sometimes they're making fun of it. Then if you have something that's accurate, but maybe there's a manipulative intent, this is advocacy journalism. So this could be things like the Philip DeFranco show or Under the Desk News, where it's not so much trying to sway you, but there is an element that they're giving their opinion. And last but not least, you have manipulative intent and false, which is things like The Onion, where they're just basically saying things that are completely wrong. And most of the time it's for entertainment, but sometimes it leaks through and people believe it. When you have lots and lots of media outlets that are all saying different things, sometimes you get what is called the hostile media phenomenon. And basically, this is where people have very strong opinions about news coverage. And the more partisan you are, so the more heavily you lean left or the more heavily you lean right, the more you become hostile to the other point of view. So if you are a heavy Fox News watcher, reader, then you are always going to attack CNN, vice versa, the other way. And that's just because you don't want to believe what the other extreme is saying. And so you want to be aware of that and how it makes you feel and kind of stay more in the central area to really get your information. Another thing you probably need to be aware of that maybe you aren't is that all media in the world is owned by 6 companies. And those companies kind of, trickle down into smaller organizations. But you have things like Disney or um, Warner Brothers, AT&T, all these things, Comcast. These are organizations that own lots of different media companies. So you want to be aware of where you're getting your news and who owns it, because sometimes you would think, oh, this is trustworthy. I think they're pretty, central in their reporting. But then you look at maybe they're owned by Disney and you can see, oh, well, they're very liberal in the way that they run their business. And so that's going to have an effect on things. With all this information, here are some ways that you can spot fake news and how you can make sure that what you're consuming online is reputable. First, consider the source. Where are you getting it from? Where's the contact info, and where did they get their sources? Read beyond the headline. Sometimes headlines are just to get you to click. And so make sure that you're reading through and getting all of the information. Check the author. Is it from a reputable news source and is the author well known? What other things have they reported on? Do they have supporting sources, meaning the people they talk to are reputable, they've done their research, they've given you the information that you could go look at it yourself? Always, always, always check the date. Make sure that it is current. Make sure that it isn't a joke. And then step back and check your own biases because this is going to really make you think, okay, am I reading this from this source because I, lean this way or this is what I believe? Is it because somebody else sent it to me? Those kinds of things. This is really going to help you grow not only as a media consumer, but as a person. And then last but not least, if you have any questions, always ask an expert. That could be your librarian, that could be your local journalist for a newspaper, television, that could be your professor. Ask somebody that knows and can help you. If you feel like you are really siloed and you need to change up your algorithm, here are some ways that you can do that. So you have escapeyourbubble.com, right, Richter, Flipfeed, and Politico, sorry. These are just some things that are going to give you different views on what's going on and kind of just help you to get out of that echo chamber. Finally, if you didn't know, you have access to the New York Times, The Atlantic, The Washington Post, and The Wall Street Journal as students. So please take advantage of those news sites and get the information from reputable sources. All in all, if you're not sure if it's fake news or if it's just an opinion that you disagree with, go through all these steps that we've talked about, really think about what's going on, and take this lecture, these ideas, and really carry them through as we go throughout the semester and how we talk about digital media and what's going on in the world.